Welcome to the Cash Flow Project Podcast. Are you looking to better your financial situation by increasing your cash flow? Too busy to hunt for real estate deals or don't know where to start? Then you're in the right spot. Join us as we dive in and talk about investing for cash flow using multifamily real estate.
Welcome to the Cash Flow Project Podcast. I'm your host, Steve Furos with Tri-City Equity Group. Today, we have Terrie Schauer on the show. With over 20 years of experience as a real estate investor and property manager, Terrie is the CEO and founder of Maroon Kitchen. She's a leading authority on applying mindfulness principles in real estate investing and has written the #1 best-selling book on the topic, Mindful Landlord. Actually just released a second edition for that, or a second follow-up to that. She's also the host of the Real Estate Investors Club podcast based there in Quebec. She's a Canadian, eh? So her passion is to help fellow investors act for both profit and peace of mind. Key areas of expertise: real estate, with a focus on holistic wealth, financial freedom, female excellence in investing, and beyond. Terrie, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm excited to have you on. I know you're fighting some winter weather. We're recording this right now, and it's still wintertime. I'm usually in Hawaii, so I usually have beaches and rainbows and sunshine and all that kind of good stuff. But I'm also experiencing a little bit of cold weather right now, so I'm suffering with you.
I'm not sure you're suffering as much, but okay.
Well, for those of our listeners that may not be, in tune to who you are and kind of your background, fill us in. How did you get started in real estate investing? Kind of tell us a little bit about your journey and brought us to who you are now today.
Sure. So I really have worn the property manager's hat for most of my career. And what happened to me is fairly typical of investors in Canada. I'm not sure if the financing laws work the same way in the States, but with us, there's kind of this line between residential properties. So that's 0 to 4 doors. And then there's multi-resident res. And when you're doing a residential property, what happens is they want to take your own personal debt ratios. So what happens is that usually after 2 or 3 properties, even if you have a decent salary, you kind of get capped and you stagnate. And that's kind of what happened to me. So I started investing when I was pretty young. I was 26 when I bought my first property. And it was, also I went to see dad and he helped me out with the down payment and co-signing the first mortgage. And then I managed the property well. And then that turned into one refinance, 2 refinances. And then we had 3 triplexes. Oh. And then after that, we had no more, capacity to show the bank. And I was like, I want to keep growing. So if I can't buy any more property, what am I going to do? Let me start managing for other people, because that was kind of how I was able to raise the income on those properties and refinance. So then I grew my management portfolio for, I guess, really the next 10 years. It's actually funny. And maybe we can get to this later in the show, but, I was really one of those people who was self-taught, but I really didn't do any networking. I didn't surround myself with other real estate people. And that's why I went through this super long plateau phase. And, while I was able to scale my management business a little bit, I didn't learn how to, do joint ventures or syndications, as you call them. I didn't learn to, how to get into multi-residential. And then really when I became involved with the Real Estate Investors Club, and surrounding myself more with other people in the industry who are in the multi-residential space, because there's a lot of small investors, but people who are professional investors, when I started kind of surrounding myself with that, then boof, my knowledge level went up and I was able to kind of get into those larger properties. And then what happened is that I started seeing what I was charging my clients. And when I began to realize how you value multi-residential real estate, I was realizing that my clients were paying me $300 a month and I was earning them $300K a year by optimizing their buildings. And then they didn't want to pay, or I'm on the phone they're getting mad at me because I ordered 3 giant garbage bins for $100 because the garbage was accumulating. And I'm like, really? I just made you $300K and you want to argue with me about authorizing an expense for $300? This is not where it's at.
It's an eye-opening experience for you, for sure.
Yeah. And so then I basically kind of closed the doors to my management portfolio. I might still take on a client or 2 if it really works with what I'm doing. But I decided, okay, I have my number of doors that I want to manage. And eventually I want all those doors to be mine. And then that's kind of what I've been doing for, I guess, the last 5 years, is kind of one in, one out. So as I grow, and then potentially people liquidate, or for whatever reason we part ways, then I've replaced their units with my units. And so that's kind of where I am.
Oh, nice. Okay. So you're kind of almost self-sustaining. You're just kind of taking on or managing their portions of the portfolio, and then just slotting in your stuff as you kind of cycle through. Oh, that's nice. Okay. So you're keeping it kind of tight, focused, not, in our space, obviously we had tons of different, investors on and whatnot. And you hear people that are scaling to, thousands and thousands. And sometimes it's mind boggling, like how many units like people have under management. And, I know that's kind of typical for the space. Like we're in the syndication space. But I mean, the range of investors that I talk to, of course, is pretty broad. So, we have few, investors with just a few short-term rentals. And then you've got, thousands and thousands of units, on that side of, like I say, in syndication. But you've made the, that choice, a conscious choice, it sounds like, maybe after networking with some other people, seeing kind of their headaches and fast tracking your knowledge a little bit. Hey, you know what? I don't know if I need that. Maybe it's not necessary for probably ease of management for one, but also maybe your own sanity sake.
100%. 100%.
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
Also, yeah, no, sorry. And also just to say, like one of the things that I find very tough as a property manager is like I have a lot of industry experience. I'm very good at what I do. Like some people, their business model, it's like renovations. Some people, they're real good at like creative financing or whatever it is. Like I'm real good at property management. And when I have someone's property that I'm taking care of, like I treat it like it's my property. And if they don't want to listen to me, it makes me crazy. Because it's like, okay, I've had, over the period of my career, like I've managed over 1,000 doors, not always in my portfolio, but like, from one end to the other, like I have a lot of knowledge, and you hire me because I'm the professional. And like, if you don't want to pay my not very expensive fees and you don't want to listen to me, like I can't. Anyway.
It's a nice part of being in a position where you can say no, right?
Yeah.
Like I've learned the power of that, right? It's like, well, every yes is it's a no to something else. So being selective with the opportunities you take on, yeah, that's huge. And, I'm sure like part of that you've learned along the way, just in your own personal experience, but, coming back to some of the networking component, everybody thinks it's like, well, yeah, you know what? I want to learn from others so that I can scale up, but it's not necessarily always the case. It's like, no, I just want to learn from others, period. I can learn from their mistakes, learn from their, their experience, their knowledge, and apply it. That's kind of the name of the game, right? Well, I know you have a focus on like holistic wealth. So I want to kind of dive in a little bit into that and kind of how that plays into, not only your investing, kind of strategy, but to your life strategy. Because it's, from what I understand, it's not necessarily, okay, hey, this is what I do. I can only apply this to my real estate portfolio. Because I think you and I both understand it's not just about the real estate. It's not just about the business. So tell us a little bit, about what that means to you and how that works in your life.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously I wrote the book, Mindful Landlord. So this topic is very close to my heart. And I'll give you two examples. One that happened sort of earlier on in my career, which was as I was growing my management business. So it's called My Room Gestion. Gestion is just management in French. So it's called My Room because I used to run it out of my room. When I started, like the way I started my company, like, I printed 100 business cards, and like I was in a pretty down and out area when I started. And so like it was ripe for growing a management portfolio because all of the other owners in the area were like really sick of the problems. And so like I kind of had this local solution. But the problem with that was that because like my office was a space in my home, like pretty soon the tenants figured out like where I lived. And I had one phone line, and we didn't have iPhones back then. So you couldn't call with like a masked number. So everybody had my phone number. And then like, it got really crazy. Like it got to, when like people would feel like they could call at any time, people would feel like they could show up. And, like my partner at the time, like I think it was like one Sunday at like 9:00, or whatever, we're just chilling. And then like some other tenant like calls, I don't pick up, then they come and show up at the door and start knocking. And he's like, Terrie, you got to do something. And I'm like, yeah, I got to do something. And so then like, I really put some thought into structuring the way the business runs. And especially like if you're a landlord, like you're a property manager, like you really have to manage your communication very effectively and like just manage the whole thing in such a way that it's not destroying your personal time. and your relationships, because if you're constantly, especially now, like it's worse, we have these things in our hands all the time. And like, if you are not able to shut off and focus on the other people that are important to you in life, like it's going to eat you. And I had those reflections before having my kid, but like now it's even worse, right? In bedtime, do I want to be taking phone calls like, what toilet's running or like somebody's mad about something? No. So like, I have a whole like thing in my book where I go through how to set up basically your workflows in such a way that it's supportive of your personal life. And then maybe that gets into what I mean sort of by holistic wealth, right? Like wealth or being financially independent, it's a practice. It's not a box that you check off on a piece of paper and it's like, oh, I'm financially independent now. Like if you want to maintain that, you're going to have to keep on maintaining it if you want it to not destroy your life, because like you can be financially independent and not have a great quality of life because you're so busy either worrying about your assets or like managing or micromanaging, that stuff can really eat you. And so when I talk about holistic wealth, it's like really thinking about that as a practice and everything that comes with that. So it's a balancing act and it's something that happens incrementally. Like you're not going to just wake up one morning and go from 0 to financially independent. It's going to take years to build up every single one of those little steps, and each step along the way, like you're getting a little bit closer to your goal, but then you have to keep the balancing act going to kind of get up to the next level of the video game or of the wealth game. And that it's hackable. The same way you would have like a yoga practice or like, I'm still a martial artist. Like it's a practice. Like it's not true that you just learn it once and then forget about it. It's the kind of thing you have to either keep doing it and then remind yourself like, no, like, okay, I started just texting again, my tenants. And so that means that they're going to have my phone number. So yeah, it was a quick thing that in the moment seemed like a good idea, but actually I'm shooting myself in the foot. So
yeah, no, that's interesting. And yeah, trying to keep your sanity too, like, right. I mean, this is, we hear this a lot, right? In like goal setting and whatnot. It's like, well, start with the end in mind, right? It's like, okay, work backwards from where you would want to see yourself, in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years or whatever. And part of that too, it's like, all right, like, I know most of us will, okay, well, I want, X amount of doors. I want, so many dollars of, passive income coming in or whatever, right? Like we have the financial goals, but too many times I don't think we set, okay, hey, I want a great relationship with my spouse. I want an excellent relationship with my kids, right? I want to be there for the games. And it's like, okay, or the events. Well, you have to kind of make sure that you're all right. Well, if that's on the goal board, that has to stay kind of first and foremost. And, not saying you won't have these periods of kind of rest run, right? Where you're like how you mentioned, right? It's like, there are going to be times where, to get this thing off the ground, we're going to have to commit a lot of time and energy. But it sounds like setting in those boundaries, like let's say in your life times, making sure that technology is cooperating with you or you utilize those tools to kind of put those barriers in place for you. It sounds like that's vital.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, the other thing that goes really hand in hand with this is like you mentioned, like I call it the bank account Olympics. And I think a lot of us get into real estate because we want financial freedom or we want to be like independent from the rat race. And then once we start succeeding, it becomes another rat race. And we're competing with the other people around us for, I call them the 3Ds, more deals, more doors, more dollars. And that becomes our metric of success. And then like, if you network with other real estate people, like it's constructive because obviously you learn stuff. It's good to have a community, but there's sometimes a tendency for it to become a competitive sport. And what you can sort of lose sight of in there is all of those lifestyle goals that really give meaning to what you're doing in the first place. Right. And, again, when I talk about Mindful Landlord, like actually the last third of the book is specifically about that, like making sure that you're intrinsically motivated for whatever you're doing and that you're not responding to some sort of extrinsic thing that you feel like a metric that you feel like you have to keep up with just because that's how other people or a community is measuring themselves. So,
yeah. And it's almost like you have to question too, like, well, where did that number come from? Like, or where did that goal come from? It's almost like you're climbing up the ladder, so to speak, like to get, a better understanding of, all right, well, what's the hidden driver there, right? And this is more like, this is all like personal development. Like I've had to dig into this space like extensively, and all of us really should. You can't just throw out an arbitrary, okay, well, hey, I want 5,000 doors. Okay, well, why? What's the goal there, right? Is it just financial independence? Okay, well then why for that? Like, is it to have more time? Like, okay, with your family? Okay, great. Then, what's the need for that, right? And you just kind of, there's layers to this, and dissecting that, being very mindful of that, even from the get-go, that's going to help to shape up, I think, probably your goals and how you live and how you attack kind of this goal, right? Like how you even get to that point. Because it may not, I know it didn't take very many doors or, much property for you to get to where you need it to be from what, from my understanding of kind of your background. You may not need hundreds and hundreds or thousands of doors, right?
Yeah, no, and so this is something I like to say. Like, I attained financial independence with my 9 doors, right? The
9 doors, guys. 9 doors. Listen to
the 3 triplexes, and like, it wasn't Airbnb. I wasn't running some like kind of crazy strategy. It's that I bought them and I waited 10 years. That's all.
And that's not what anybody wants to hear, right? They want what's the fast answer? How can I get there like immediately, right? And it's like, you guys, like everybody, it's just, it's a long-term game. I always like to tell people, like anybody that I'm interacting with, or look, if you put anything out in a long enough timeline, and you have to think that way, put it on a long enough timeline, you win. You bought real estate, you hold it, you operate it well, just put it on a long enough timeline, you'll win. Like it's not necessarily rocket science, but it's also not fast. And that's what people, I think, a lot of times don't like. It's like, well, no, but I need that like yesterday. I need that. Like, how can I get there in 6 months? I'm not saying that there's not, hey, that whatever you need to get you going, but part of it is like, yeah, you want to be mindful of that strategy. Again, keeping your goals in mind, work backwards, so you don't burn yourself out. Right. So that's great. Well, what do you see? Obviously we're going through kind of some turbulent, it's been crazy the last several years, ups and downs, right? We're on the roller coaster for sure. After those couple of years of highs with COVID and, all that kind of stuff. And now it seems like we're trending down, recession and all this kind of stuff. Where do you see, can you have with your magical crystal ball, what are you advising, like, let's say any clients that you've got going, or what advice do you have like for other investors at this point on how to manage a portfolio or any opportunities or that kind of stuff?
Sure. So, kind of data point, Canada, I'm active in Canada. I don't own any investments outside of the country. And we actually never had 2008. So we never had the market correction that we kind of should have had. And so we've been on this like continuous growth trend basically since the early 2000s. So like our correction is going to be worse than yours. It actually already is worse than yours. So we're looking at like a major market shift. Also, like a lot of our mortgages here, especially single family homes, I think it's something like 40% are on variable rate mortgages. So it's been like a really brutal last 4 months. And like we have the same inflation that the US has. So, I think for investors, it's pretty challenging now to find deals that make sense. But for people who are interested in investing in Canada, there's 2 things I have to say. The first one is a deal is a deal is a deal. And it just happens that at 2% interest, there's more deals than there is at 5% interest. But, if you think back a year or 2, it was impossible to get an offer in. And that was the challenge at that time, was to find any deal, right? Like if you could just get any deal accepted, it kind of didn't matter what you paid for it because the interest was so low that it automatically made sense. Whereas now we're in a different climate where it's difficult to get capital because a lot of people are, they're tight, or else their stuff is locked up in other projects that they can't sell. And finding the deals is maybe not so difficult, but as long as you crunch the numbers, if the deal makes sense, it makes sense. And it kind of doesn't matter like what the, outside volatility is. Like us, we lock in our interest rates for 5 years. So you have a 5-year runway. And if your deal makes sense for the next 5 years, then it makes sense. And don't, ask yourself too many questions. I maintain that in any market, when a deal makes sense, it makes sense. You can't think that it's a 2% interest environment though, and go buying everything, because then you're going to make a mistake. So, that's the first thing. The second thing is Canada right now, our government just really opened the doors. So for the next, I think 5 years, they're planning to let in as many immigrants as the United States. And we're the size of California. So they want to add I think we're 30 million Canadians. They want to get us to 40 million Canadians in, I think it's 20 years, 15 years. Anyway, they're on this crazy growth path. But what that means for us landlords is that the rental markets are going to be incredibly tight. And we had trouble during COVID, our rental vacancies were relatively high, but now they're not building. They've basically a lot of people have stopped building because of the interest rate crunch. And so we're stuck with our number of units. And I think Canada would need to, it's something crazy. It's like millions of homes, millions of apartments to just meet demand. And we're not even like keeping pace with our current vacancy rates. So, while for tenants, that's kind of difficult because it's going to mean that they're going to have trouble like finding places for themselves. As if you're a landlord, every time you have somebody leave, it's like really good for you. And so I think if you're looking, on the sort of the 5-year time horizon, you can, if the deal makes sense today, it's in 5 years time, it's really going to make sense.
Oh yeah. Now you're thinking like, okay, well, for the investors out there, it's like, hey man, there's some geographic arbitrage, some currency arbitrage potential for, investors in the US looking for markets in the, maybe other alternative markets. If your market's too expensive, hey, maybe you look internationally, what Terrie's saying, it's like, well, there's a huge opportunity there. And I saw it. I was just in Canada. I was there for a month. We were in Vancouver and Edmonton and Calgary and a bunch of different cities. And, the amount of what I felt like I could tell, like there was just a change to the demographics there. It was like, I can see, and I was reading articles about it, the amount of immigration that they're trying to spur on. It's huge. I mean, it's very apparent to me from the places that we were visiting. So that's a unique opportunity. So yeah, remember there's opportunity in every market, like every market cycle. I don't know what to tell you. There's a lot of people that just sit on the sidelines and, hey, I get that it's risk off, we're in a risk off cycle right now or whatever. But again, there's opportunity always. You just have to know how to identify it. You got to go work for it. It is there. I promise you. All right. Well, as we kind of, I want to make sure we're respectful of your time as we kind of wind up, here. And I know, for the listeners, go get her book. You'll be able to kind of pick her brain a little bit more virtually there that way. But we transition right now into the fire round. Terrie, you ready?
Go for it.
All right. Sounds good. All right. What is the best book that you recommend other than Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and your own? If you've got.
Oh man, you took out my two. Not fair. You took out my 2 recommendations.
You can plug your own. You can plug your book definitely. But if you've got another one too, like that would be cool.
No, well, obviously, I love my own book. But in terms of books that really impacted me, what set me on the mindfulness path is Way of the Peaceful Warrior by Dan Millman. So it's not real estate, but if you read that, it's going to really kind of shift your perspective in how you look at things. In terms of business books, I really like The One Thing by Gary Keller, which if you're looking for, sort of efficiencies and how to prioritize, how to scale, it really gave me some new perspective.
Yeah, no, that's great. Great books too. What is the biggest lesson that you've learned over your career up to this point? 20 plus years. I'm sure there's a bunch. I'd say what's the biggest one?
Yeah.
If you can
yeah. Well, I mean, I would kind of echo what you said before about time taking care of things, right? That there's a lot of, if I look back at the deals that I passed on now almost 20 years ago, if I'd have not passed on all those deals, I would be a very rich lady today. Mm-hmm. And with that sort of looking back, I think time erases a lot of things that seem like errors in real estate. And like you said, if you can operate whatever the project is, if you can hold the carrying costs for the necessary time, it might not be the best deal in 1 year as you projected. But, if you push that out 5 years, 10 years, time fixes pretty much every mistake you could make.
It's not time in the market, guys. It's time in the market. And people say that for stocks and equities. It's absolutely true for real estate too. That's great. For the busy working professional, that's trying to work towards financial freedom, just like you did, what advice do you have for them?
So lifestyle hits. I think, we live in the time of Instagram and everybody's looking like they're balling and they're having instant success. It's not true, guys. It's not true. You don't get to financial independence. You don't get to be like successful in real estate without taking lifestyle hits. And, for me to be super transparent, like I went to live in a bad part of town and I lived with my tenants for 10 years and took a lot of lifestyle hits. My friends were buying new cars and nice condos with pools and had nice cars. And, that was not my reality. It might be more like my reality now, but I'm not working 60 hours a week like my friends are. But I think it's important to be aware that like, you don't get to succeed at a high level in anything without taking a lifestyle hit. And I wish that, investors would be more transparent about that, because I think it's important for people to realize that, like, don't, in French, we have an expression that says, don't sell dreams, like it's important to have dreams, but it's also important to be realistic about what it takes to actually get there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's absolutely true. And I've seen that in our personal life as well. What is it? If you do the things now that others won't do, you'll get to do the things and have the things later that others won't have. I probably butchered that, but you get the idea. It's the same concept. So yeah, no, that's huge. No, that's great advice. Well, how can our how can our audience get out in touch with you? If you want to, find out a little bit more about you, what you've got going on, what's the best way to reach out?
Yeah. So my social media of choice is LinkedIn. So you can just look at my name, Terrie Schauer, on LinkedIn. I'm happy to connect with people. Otherwise, you could check out my book on Amazon, Mindful Landlord, or it has its own website, mindfullandlord.com, which will help you migrate either to the US page or the Canadian page, depending on where you want to order from.
Gotcha. Awesome. Well, Terrie, it's been a pleasure. I really, really appreciate you jumping on with us today. And I've got some great takeaways. So I really appreciate that. And hopefully our listeners got a ton of value out of that. So thanks so much for hopping on with us. We'll wish you safety as you go out and brave the snow and the cold weather up there and some warmth too. All right. So,
well, but I'm going to Florida tomorrow, so I can't play the violin too hard,
There you go. Awesome.
Right,
thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. And we really appreciate you coming on. Thanks again. Oh, what a great episode with Terrie Schauer on the show. We didn't have too much time with her, not as much as I probably would have liked. But, of course, we always want to be mindful of everybody who comes on the show. But I'm super grateful to have met her and had her on the show. Lots of great insight. She shared with us, you don't necessarily need to have like a massive portfolio to reach, for one, not only financial independence, but in order to keep your own sanity, start with the end in mind. Right. Start with the goals in mind and what you want to have happen in your own life. And you don't have to necessarily always do it. You may want, that 20,000 units or, whatever. And that's awesome. It's just, you got to always make sure that you're trying to maintain some kind of balance in your life, whether that be rest run, whether that be, just having everybody on board. But just always being very mindful of that. Like her whole ethos is having holistic wealth. Right. So being wealthy in all areas, not just financially, right? We want to have our health. We want to have great relationships. You want to have success in other areas of life. It's all not necessarily just wealth, like financial wealth. So huge takeaway. She has some great book recommendations. Of course, the one thing, Gary Keller, that's such a great recommendation for anybody who's for an agent, investor. He's definitely got some great books out there, but that's always been a great one. And then The Way of the Peaceful Warrior, that one I wasn't as familiar with. So definitely it's going to be something I'm going to check out. To learn a little bit more about that. It sounds definitely interesting. And then, of course, her own book, The Mindful Landlord. So that's through her, her personal experience as not only a property manager, but an investor herself. So definitely make sure that you guys are checking it out. And she just released an updated copy of that. So make sure that you're checking it out. And then if you guys, of course, are interested in investing with us, go to tricityequity.com. You can learn more there. You can schedule a call with somebody on our team to learn more about what it would take or what kind of deals we've got going on, all that kind of good stuff to connect with like-minded investors. And if join our Facebook group, Honolulu Multifamily and More. We meet locally every month there in Honolulu, some location around on the island. So we'd love to see you out if you're local there in Hawaii or visiting or whatever. We'd love to be able to meet you in person, shake a hand. Occasionally, we would also have like virtual meetups as well. So just make sure you join the Facebook group. You'll learn more details there. Of course, if you found value in this podcast, please make sure that you're sharing the show. We'd greatly appreciate a 5-star review wherever you're finding us. If that's Spotify, Apple Podcast, Stitcher, iTunes, wherever, make sure that you're leaving us a 5-star review and share the show. We'd greatly appreciate it. And of course, if you know anybody else that might resonate with the podcast, make sure that you're sharing it. And we would greatly appreciate that. Also want to make sure that you guys know about our upcoming conference, June 29th through July 1st. It's the Hawaii Millionaire Mindset Conference. Again, this is our second version of it. Last year was the first one. Huge success. All the attendees had tons of great value. We had a lot of great speakers. So this year is going to be even better. It's over on the Big Island of Hawaii. Over at the beautiful Maunalani Resort. So if you guys are wanting to come out to Hawaii, wanting to find an excuse, it's a great way to make it some kind of a business write-off. Come out and learn, some education, meet some great people, investors, operators. We're going to have a great panel for you guys. So please make sure that you're going out and blocking off that time, making plans to be out here in Hawaii. All right, guys. Well, that's going to be it for our show today. We'll see you next time. Aloha.